Thanksgiving was supposed to be chill, but with my family? Yeah, right. This year took the cake. Getting kicked out during dinner? Didn't see that coming. I was 25, lived alone, worked remote in IT. Not rich, but stable. Every month, I sent my parents cash for bills. No questions asked. But this time, they wanted me to fund their week-long dream vacation at some luxury resort. $8,000. $8,000. I almost spit out my pumpkin pie. I mean, come on. $8,000 for them to lounge on a beach while I was stuck fixing buggy code? No. Mom stared at me like I just told her I was moving to Mars. Dad, usually too busy yelling at the TV, jumped in, calling me selfish. Classic. Family, right? The same family that never called unless they needed money. I laid it out plain and simple. Rent, groceries, my clunky old Honda, all on me. But logic, not their thing. Mom started her Oscar-worthy tears. Dad started ranting, and my brother Mike, 28, jobless, living rent-free at home, suddenly became their hero. Mike would do it if he could, Mom sniffled. Sure, if he ever got off the couch. But hey, I was the villain because I didn't want to drain my savings. Cue the guilt trip. Mom brought up her 20-hour labor like it was yesterday. Dad, who hadn't worked in years, preached about family loyalty while probably planning his next fishing trip. Then came the dagger. If you loved us, you do this. Yep, there it was. I kept my cool, stood up, and said no. Not because I didn't care, but because I couldn't keep torching my future for their comfort. And then, my dad pointed to the door. On Thanksgiving, my mom nodded. Even Mike, shoveling pie into his mouth, gave me a tough break look. I stepped outside into the cold, the door shutting behind me. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't about the money. It never was. It was about their never-ending entitlement and the harsh truth that no matter what I gave, it would never be enough. That realization hurt more than getting kicked out on Thanksgiving night. Walking back into my apartment that night felt surreal. The glow of my laptop screen was the only thing waiting for me. I kicked off my worn sneakers, tossed my jacket on the floor, and collapsed onto my saggy couch, the stuffing poking through one corner like it was mocking me. The smell of stale takeout lingered in the air. Thanksgiving dinner? More like Thanksgiving disaster. I grabbed the last slice of cold pizza from the box on the coffee table. Not exactly turkey and stuffing. But hey, it wasn't like I had much of an appetite after being kicked out by my own parents. I tried to feel angry, but all I felt was numb. The silence in my apartment was deafening. No passive-aggressive jabs from Mom about my weight. No dad yelling at the TV because the ref made a bad call. No Mike raiding my fridge. Just me. Alone. A month crawled by. No calls. No texts. Not even a meme from Mike. Honestly, it was kind of nice. I buried myself in work, binged every trashy reality show Netflix had to offer, and made late-night Taco Bell runs like they were part of my daily routine. But peace? With my family? Yeah, that never lasted. One night, while debating whether reheating leftover mac and cheese was worth the effort, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Great. Probably another scam call about my car's extended warranty. I was about to ignore it, but something told me to pick up. Ethan? It was my mom, Linda. Her voice cracked before she even said another word. My first thought? She finally called to apologize. Wishful thinking. Nope. She wasn't calling to say sorry. She was calling because Mike had, once again, proven that responsibility was not in his vocabulary. Apparently, Mike owed $15,000 to some loan sharks. How? Knowing Mike. Probably a mix of poker nights he couldn't afford and some brilliant investment tips from his equally brilliant friends at the bar. And now, the guys he owed weren't exactly the take-your-time type. Linda begged me to help. Said they threatened to hurt Mike if he didn't pay up. She cried. Told me she couldn't lose her son. My brain screamed, not my circus, not my monkeys, but my gut twisted. Mike might be a freeloading mess, but he was still my brother. I stared at the ceiling, phone pressed to my ear, heart pounding like I'd just run a marathon. Help them and bail Mike out, or hang up and finally, for once, put myself first? Funny how $8,000 for a vacation now seemed like a minor inconvenience compared to $15,000 in borrowed trouble. I had a choice to make, and no matter what, it would cost me. I couldn't sleep that night. My mind kept spinning, replaying my mom's shaky voice and Mike's latest disaster. Loan sharks? Seriously? This wasn't some Netflix crime show. This was my messed up life. And once again, I was stuck cleaning it up. By morning, my phone was blowing up with 17 missed calls and a flood of texts from Linda. All variations of the same thing. Help Mike or he's toast. I gave in and called her back. She didn't waste a second, spilling every messy detail. Turns out, Mike didn't just owe $15,000. He owed it to some guys who made reality TV villains look like choir boys. Mike's genius move? Borrowing money to gamble, convinced he'd win big. Plot twist, he didn't. Now the people he owed weren't exactly sending friendly payment reminders. They wanted their cash yesterday. Linda begged, cried, and pulled the classic "we're family" line. Then Frank, my dad, who hadn't worked a day since flip phones were a thing, decided this was somehow my responsibility. Because, I had a steady paycheck. I felt like someone dropped a cinder block on my chest. But then, an idea hit me. If I was going to bail Mike out, there'd be strings attached. Tight ones. I told Linda I'd pay off the debt, but Mike had to step up. No more mooching, no more get-rich-quick nonsense. He'd get a job, even if it meant flipping burgers or delivering pizzas in his beat-up Toyota. Every month, he'd pay me back until every penny of that $15,000 was settled in 6 months. And his poker buddies? Done. No more shady hangouts. No more bad influences. Linda hesitated like I just asked her to give up cable TV, but I didn't budge. Take it or leave it. She caved. Mike, he didn't exactly get a vote. As I hung up, I felt a weird mix of relief and dread. Maybe, just maybe, this would be the slap Mike needed to get his act together. But knowing my family, I wasn't holding my breath. Wiring $15,000 from my savings felt like swallowing a whole cactus. But I did it. I bailed Mike out. Again. And like clockwork, I waited for him to get his act together. Spoiler alert, he didn't. Days turned into weeks. I kept checking my phone, hoping for a text from Mike with news of a job or, I don't know, some effort. Instead, radio silence. Not even a lousy thanks. Meanwhile, I was pulling extra hours at work, living off frozen dinners and gas station coffee. Every time I passed my worn-out couch, I thought about the $15,000 hole in my bank account. It felt like I was living on ramen while Mike was living rent-free in my head. I finally cracked and called him. He picked up mid-chew, probably one of those gas station hot dogs that looked older than me. I asked how the job hunt was going. His answer? A bored, I'm thinking about it, like finding a job with some optional side quest. I stared at my ceiling, trying not to scream. Thinking about it, I wasn't exactly asking him to climb Everest. I reminded him, politely at first, about the deal. 6 months. Pay me back. Simple. Mike, he chuckled. Actually chuckled. Said, relax, bro. It's just money. Just money. My money. I hung up, pacing my tiny apartment like a madman. My microwave beeped, reminding me my dinner was ready. A sad burrito from the freezer aisle. Perfect. I sat down, took a bite, and felt my frustration bubble up like the cheap cheese inside that burrito. Helping family was one thing. Being treated like an ATM with bad customer service? That was new. I wasn't going to let this slide. Not this time. Cutting off my family financially felt like ripping off a Band-Aid. Painful but necessary. I canceled the monthly cash I sent them, pulled the plug on the streaming services they mooched off me, goodbye, Netflix leeches, and even axed a gym membership my dad never used but swore he needed. The fallout? Immediate chaos. My phone lit up like a Christmas tree. Linda left voicemails packed with dramatic sighs and lines like, "After all we've done for you." Frank ranted in texts about family loyalty, which was ironic coming from a guy whose most loyal relationship was with his recliner. And Mike? He sent one text that really sealed the deal. "Wow, petty much?" Classic. I sprawled on my couch, sipping a big gulp from 7-Eleven, scrolling through their meltdowns like they were Yelp reviews of a bad diner. As much as I laughed at their tantrums, I underestimated one thing: how petty my family could really be. A few nights later, I came home from a late-night grocery run, juggling a frozen pizza, a six-pack of cheap beer, and a pack of gas station gummy bears I definitely didn't need. I unlocked my door, stepped inside, and froze. My stomach plummeted. The living room looked like a frat party aftermath. Couch cushions everywhere, drawers pulled open, and oh yeah, my Xbox? Gone. My laptop? Nowhere to be seen. Even my half-eaten bag of Doritos? Vanished. Not cool. The weirdest part? No forced entry. No kicked-in door, no broken windows. Everything locked tight, just how I left it. That's when my brain kicked into overdrive. My spare key. Months ago, during a visit to my parents, I forgot my keys and had to go back for them. I left them out for maybe a minute, but that was all the time Mike needed. I could almost hear him laughing, standing there in my wrecked apartment. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might break my ribs. This wasn't just payback for cutting them off. This was personal. And I knew exactly who was behind it. Standing in my trashed apartment, it hit me like a truck. My own family did this. My stomach twisted as the reality sank in. Mike didn't just mess up this time. He crossed a line you can't uncross. I stared at the empty spot where my Xbox used to be, feeling my pulse in my ears. Enough was enough. I paced around, picking up random things that were tossed everywhere. My favorite hoodie was on the floor, covered in who knows what. My shelves were empty, and even my spare phone charger was gone. Seriously, Mike? A charger? I let out a bitter laugh, grabbed my phone, and dialed 911 before I could talk myself out of it. Explaining the situation to the dispatcher felt surreal. "So, your brother robbed you?" "Yep." "Wild." She promised officers would be over soon, and as soon as I hung up, I felt a mix of anger and relief. When the cops showed up, they took one look at my place and nodded like they'd seen this 100 times before. I gave them Mike's info and tried to ignore the embarrassment creeping up my neck. As they left, one officer chuckled and said, "Family, huh?" I forced a smile. The next morning, my phone exploded with calls and texts. Linda left voicemails between sobs, begging me not to press charges. Frank sent a rant about family sticking together from the recliner he probably hadn't left in days. Mike, silence. Figures. I tried to focus on work, but every ping from my phone reminded me of the mess. Linda's text got more desperate, like a bad reality show finale. "Please, Ethan, don't do this. We're family." Yeah, well, family doesn't rob each other. That afternoon, 2 officers knocked on my parents' door. I wasn't there, but I could imagine Linda clutching her pearls like a southern grandma. She called me seconds later, her voice cracking as she begged me to reconsider. She said Mike didn't mean it, that he was just lost. "He's your brother," she wailed. I gritted my teeth. My brother? More like a professional screw-up. I told her I wouldn't press charges, but my conditions were clear. Mike was done. No calls, no texts, no showing up at my door asking for just one more favor. And my parents, same deal. From that moment, they were out of my life. Linda's sobs echoed through the phone, but I stood my ground. After hanging up, I flopped on my couch, feeling something I hadn't felt in years, freedom. The cops found my stuff at a pawn shop. No surprise there. Looking at my messy apartment, I realized this wasn't an ending. It was a fresh start, and I was ready for whatever came next. A couple of days after cutting ties with my parents and Mike, I thought the drama was over. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. My phone buzzed while I was mid-bite into a greasy burger from the diner down the street. A known number, probably another robocall about my expiring car warranty. But something told me to pick up. Ethan? It was Grandpa George. His voice was soft, but there was that familiar no-nonsense tone underneath. George and Grandma Barb ran a small convenience store in Indiana. The kind of place where the cash register was older than me, and the candy bars were probably from the Clinton era. We weren't close, but they never forgot my birthday. He sounded confused, concerned. Linda had called, spinning a story that could win her an Emmy. According to her, I was some selfish, ungrateful kid who abandoned his struggling family while I lived it up. Classic. I wiped my hands on my jeans and laid it all out. The $15,000 bailout, Mike's disappearing act, my stuff in a pawn shop, everything. The line went quiet for a moment, and then George sighed, the kind of sigh that said, I've seen too much in my day. Ethan, he said, slow and steady, I'm sorry. Not for me, for them. Then Grandma Barb jumped in, probably balancing the store phone on her shoulder while ringing up a pack of gum. She said they had no idea things had gotten this bad. Then came the kicker. They were done supporting my parents financially. No more covering their bills. No more loans that never got paid back. Before I could process that, George added, we're sending you the $15,000 Mike owes you. I nearly choked on my fries. I protested, but George wasn't having it. You earned it, kid. Stand your ground, he said. Grandma Barb agreed, probably shaking her head at Mike's stupidity. By the time I hung up, I felt relief, guilt, and exhaustion all at once. A few days later, Linda called, hysterical. She begged me to talk to George and Barb, to fix this, but for the first time, I didn't cave. And as their financial lifeline vanished, so did their control over me. The family was falling apart, and weirdly, I felt like I was finally putting myself back together. Weeks passed, and life started to feel normal. No guilt trips, no late-night calls asking for money, no Mike showing up at my door looking for a small favor. My apartment was finally peaceful. I actually slept through the night, without my phone buzzing like a broken alarm clock. I settled into a new routine, work, gym, takeout, repeat. My fridge was stocked with groceries I actually bought for myself. I wasn't dodging financial disasters every other week. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like someone's personal ATM. Looking back, it all felt surreal. From the moment they asked me for money for a vacation, to Mike's financial disaster, to the day I cut them off, it was like watching someone else's life. But it was mine, and every decision led me here. One afternoon, while binge-watching some crime doc and eating leftover Chinese straight from the carton, my phone lit up. The name flashing on the screen made me groan. Linda. I stared at it, ignored it, but it rang again, and again. Curiosity won. Her voice was softer than usual, almost rehearsed. She said they miss me, that they wanted to make things right. I rolled my eyes so hard I practically saw my brain. I wasn't buying it. Not after everything. I told her I wasn't interested in apologies. She kept talking, and that's when she dropped the bomb. Mike had been arrested for something serious. Now he was in trouble, facing real consequences. She begged for money, bail, lawyers, anything. I couldn't help it. I laughed, not out of spite, but because it was just so predictable. I thought about every time I bailed him out, every sacrifice I made, and every moment they made me feel like I owed them something. I asked her if she hurt herself. After years of manipulation, she was still trying to pull the same trick. Except this time, I wasn't playing. I told her Mike's mess wasn't my problem anymore. She gasped like I had just said the most offensive thing in the world. But I stood my ground. No more bailouts. No more emotional blackmail. As I hung up, I looked around my tiny apartment. It wasn't much, but it was mine. And for the first time in years, I felt free. The drama, the guilt, the constant pressure, it was gone. My story wasn't perfect, but it was mine. For the first time in years, I wasn't tied down by my family's chaos. And man, it felt good.